Let's break down all of the costs involved in graduate medicine Ireland for both EU and non-EU students, starting with school tuition fees. These tuition fees are based on the University of Limerick, so about 16,000 for EU and about 53,400 for non-EU. Based on my own experience and looking at resources online, the average off-campus accommodation in Limerick probably sits around €600, while if you choose to go on campus, you can get a medical student extended academic year, and that tends to be nearing €8,000 or nearly €800 a month. It is of course worth bearing in mind that in your clinical years, particularly years 3 and 4, you need to factor in moving for placements, especially in final year for us where we change over every 6 weeks. This can involve staying in rural areas and short-term leases, which can of course change the price year on year. Not everyone is going to have a car, but this is something that kind of ties in with the rent. So if you choose to live off campus, you're more likely to need a car, whereas if you're on campus, you're less likely. Either way, for rural placements, most people will have a car at some point. The cost of living, so obviously this is going to vary significantly person to person, but as we know, Ireland is not the cheapest place to live nowadays. I've gone pretty conservatively with €300 a month. That's for everything from groceries, gym memberships, social events like medball, all of those kinds of things. It really depends month to month. It would vary with your costs. But my advice is just go for Mark's method and live off energy drinks. Serious money to be saved. The remaining fees in the preclinical years are typically for the North American students, and those include things like immigration fees that are about €300 every year, flights to and from home. So I've estimated this based on maybe the average return flight to North America. That might be Canada for a lot of my colleagues. Twice a year, so that'd be maybe once at Christmas and then once when you're heading home in the summer. And then of course there is additional resources, so anyone thinking about sitting the American board exams or even Canadian boards, you might be considering additional resources such as UWorld, Boards and Beyond and things like that. So I factored all of those into the preclinical costs. Of course, in your clinical years, there are some additional costs to consider, particularly for North American students again. So the first is the STEP exams 1 and 2. I've grouped these together in the clinical, even though you might have done step 1 preclinically. The reason why is that this kind of matches up with Canadian MCC-QE1. It's similar price conversion from what I can see. Electives is based on doing one elective through the AFMC portal. Applying to the US-Canadian residency takes into account a number of different factors such as ECFMG certification, sending transcripts for step 1 and 2, fee for your school, and the cost per application, which to my knowledge is $11 per application up to 30, or if you're applying to more than 30 programs, then it is $30 per program, and I've done for an average of applying to 150 programs. Now that might vary significantly. There are other costs like getting headshots done and things like that to consider when you're factoring all those in. And finally, the additional resources again if you're prepping for step 2, etc. So I guess the take-home message from all of this is quite a lot of money. I think we all need to make our own coffee at home. So there you have it, the full costing of 4 years of grad med based on my experience at UL. A couple of things to mention. First of all, my costings are not exhaustive. You could incorporate more things, for example, into clinical years, like even buying scrubs and stethoscopes and stuff like this. Also, my calculation at the bottom to give the total might look a bit odd because it's 3 times the preclinical and 1 times the clinical. That's mainly because the preclinical costs are ones that you'll carry over into your clinical years, whereas the clinical costs that I accumulated are typically costs that you'll incur once, either in 3rd year or 4th.